Well, kia ora everyone. As Mel said, this is the final message in the series that we've been running for the last 2 months called It's Your Move. And it's been based around this idea of all of the different ways that God can invite us to take the next step, whatever that might look like, in our spiritual journey with Him. And we've had this brilliant graphic, which we're going to chuck up on the screen again, designed by Nathaniel for this series, but utilising this idea of a metro system or a transportation system. And today we've hit most of the stations on this graphic as we've gone through the last 2 months. But the final 2 stations we're going to pop into today are the ones circled there up in the top right: gather regularly, and further down, join a group. And both of those have this idea of gathering, of meeting with our brothers and sisters, either in a large gathering on Sunday in our services or online if you're joining us this way, and in smaller gatherings in homes and connect groups, as we call them here. And so the invitation is to think about our commitment to gathering, our commitment to being together as we are today or online and through the week in these connect groups. And really the key question I want to ask comes from a book written by an author that's been around for many, many years now called Philip Yancey. Written a number of books. Those who are more my kind of age group may well have read some Philip Yancey books through the years. But about 30 years ago, he released a really little book that had a really simple message, but I loved the title. It was simply this: Church, Why Bother? That was the title. Church, Why Bother? But it's a brilliant exploration of the themes that we're going to look at today. Today, I want to take us to a really important passage of the Bible in one of the last parts of the New Testament to be written. It's called Hebrews, the book of Hebrews, or the letter to the Hebrews. And it was written to Jewish Christians who'd become followers of Jesus, but because of persecution were feeling like maybe they needed to go back to their old faith and to go back to their old way of life, really. And the writer to the Hebrews, the writer of this letter, who we don't know who it is, anonymous, he's trying to explain to them using some really deep teaching through the Old Testament that all of the Old Testament systems and worship and sacrifices, they were all pointing to Jesus. And so basically what he's trying to help them understand, the theme of the letter to the Hebrews is, hey, Jesus is way better. Jesus is way better than all of that we've left behind. So stay walking with Jesus. Stay committed to Jesus. That's the whole theme. And there's quite a strong argument going all the way through the letter. And then we come to a pivotal paragraph where he's about to finish the theology and move into the so what towards the end. And it's in Hebrews chapter 10. I want to read the paragraph and then I want to kind of walk through it together. Here's what he writes: Therefore, brothers and sisters, since we have confidence to enter the most holy place by the blood of Jesus, by a new and living way opened for us through the curtain that is his body, and since we have a great high priest over the house of God, let us draw near to God with a sincere heart and with a full assurance that faith brings, having our hearts sprinkled to cleanse us from a guilty conscience and having our bodies washed with pure water. Let us hold unswervingly to the hope that we profess, for he who promised is faithful. And let us consider how we may spur one another on to love and good deeds, not giving up meeting together as some are in the habit of doing, but encouraging one another, and all the more as you see this day approaching. Now the writer, as he writes this paragraph, it's almost a hinge in the letter, really helps us by using some repetition. So in the opening verses, the writer will repeat the word since. You notice that? Up in verse 19, since we have confidence. Verse 21, since we have a great high priest. And what the writer's doing is trying to summarize everything that they've already written in the letter. The first 9 or 10 chapters kind of is all being summarized. Since Jesus has done all this is basically the argument. Because of what Jesus has done, he's then going to call us to some actions. And we don't have time to delve into all those opening chapters, but basically the writer's saying Jesus has made it possible through his life, through his death on the cross in our place, through his bodily resurrection. He's made it possible for us to now have a relationship with God that will last forever. So because of what Jesus has done, he says, here's what I'm calling you to do. And again, he uses repetition. This time, he'll use the same words 3 times through the second half of the paragraph. He says, let us. 3 times. Let us, verse 22, draw near to God. Let us, verse 23, hold unswervingly to the hope. Verse 24, let us consider how we may spur one another on. And so 3 times he's making this call, let us, let us. So the first one is let us draw near to God. And this is an invitation to deepen our relationship with God, to enjoy intimacy with God, to become closer and closer with him in awe and in worship. So this first call, let us draw near, is kind of an upward invitation to become closer and closer to God. He's saying don't shrink back, don't hold back, kind of step in and draw near to God, because that's what Jesus has enabled us to do. It reminds me of an event from my life as a young dad. Harrison, who's sitting down here, is our youth pastor at Green Lane, but he was once this gorgeous little toddler, 2 years old. And we have a family photo. Rochelle did brilliant photo albums as our kids were little. And one year there's this family photo. It's Harrison and I. We're down at the local mall. He's 2 years old. And the characters from Winnie the Pooh were doing a stage show. So there was Winnie the Pooh and Tigger and Eeyore and Piglet. They're 4 obviously human beings dressed in costumes. And Harrison and I are there and we watched the stage show, and it was really cool, particularly for a 2-year-old toddler. And he loved Winnie the Pooh. And at the end of the show they said, if any of the kids would like their photo taken with Winnie the Pooh and the others, then come and line up and you can get your photo taken. And I said, do you want your photo taken with Winnie the Pooh? And Harrison was, oh yeah. And so the line was pretty long, but it's worth waiting for, especially for Tigger, because he's awesome. So we're at the back of the line and we're slowly moving forward. And as we get closer and closer to the stage, Harrison gets more and more quiet. And we get nearer and nearer the stage, and then suddenly he says, Daddy, I don't want to see Winnie the Pooh anymore. Because the closer we got to the stage, the bigger he realized these guys are. And when you're only 2 years old, you're not very big, and these guys look stinking big. And the closer we get to the stage, the more he's going, I don't want to meet them, Daddy. I don't want to meet them. And the photograph in our photo album is me on the stage. And we've got Winnie the Pooh and Tigger and Eeyore and Piglet. And I'm grinning like anything to the person having the photo. And Harrison, I'm holding Harrison at this point because he's going to do a runner, and he's bawling his eyes out. It's one of my favorite memories as a dad. But here's the thing, and here's the reason I tell that. In theory, this little toddler loved the idea of meeting Winnie the Pooh. But the closer he got to Winnie the Pooh, the bigger Winnie the Pooh became in his eyes, and the more scared he was. And for many of us, friends, that's exactly what it's like with God. God is an awesome God. God is much bigger than we realize. God is far holier than we really understand. And so often, friends, we love the idea in theory of drawing near to God, but the closer we get to God, the bigger he becomes in our eyes, and often the more scared we are. And the writer to the Hebrews is saying, I know he's scary. I know he's awesome. I know he's more magnificently holy than we've ever understood, but because of what Jesus has done, we can draw near to him. So let's do that. Let's enjoy the intimacy we have where we can come to the creator of all that is and call him Abba, Father, Daddy. Let's draw near, the writer says. And then secondly, in addition to drawing near, he says, let's hold tight. Let's hold tight to the hope we profess. And whenever I even say those words, I don't know if you notice, I instinctively do this with my arms. Let's hold tight. And I love watching rugby league and rugby union and stuff. And I love it when a player's holding the rugby ball and they're about to be tackled and they know they're about to get hit. They almost hold the ball in more closely because they know they're going to take a tackle. They know they're going to hit the ground and they don't want to lose the ball in the tackle. So that they grip on. And that's the sense here. Hey, hold tight to the hope we profess. What is this hope? The hope is the promises that God has given us in his word of everything that he's promised for the future that's going to come true. Our problem is that the word hope in normal everyday language is utterly different to what the Bible means. Think about how we use that word. I hope I pass the exam at uni next week. I hope she gets her driver's license. I hope I get that job. I hope the Warriors win this year. That's why I'm wearing my Warriors shirt. But when we use the word hope in ordinary conversation, what we're meaning is we desire this, we dream for this, we hope for this, and there's absolutely no certainty. Particularly if you're a Warriors fan, there is absolutely no certainty. Friends, when the Bible uses the word hope, it means the complete opposite. It means what God has promised, there is complete certainty that He is going to do. And so we need to undo our thinking of how we normally use the word hope. When we read it in the Bible, the writer says, let's hold unswervingly to the hope we profess. Because God is certain. That's what He says, for He who promised is faithful. So the writer says, because of everything Jesus has done, let's draw near to God. And let's hold tight to this hope that we've got. That's absolutely guaranteed. And then thirdly, let's spur each other on. Let's put the mirror down where so often we're focused on what's happening in my life and what's coming this week and all the worries that consume me. And let's stop thinking about just ourselves and let's instead think about each other. Let's think about other people in our lives. Let's be praying for each other, encouraging each other, challenging each other, helping each other. And that's the call of this passage. In light of everything Jesus has done, let's draw near and let's hold tight. And let's spur on, upward, inward, and outward. And then at the end of that, to wrap that, he says these amazing words in verse 25, the last verse of this paragraph. Not giving up meeting together, as some are in the habit of doing, but encouraging one another, and all the more as you see the day approaching. Notice there's both a negative and a positive command in this wrap-up verse. Let's not stop meeting together negatively. Instead, positively, let's meet and encourage each other. Now, most scholars, as they talk about this passage, they link this verse 25 back to verse 24, because you can't spur each other on if we're not seeing each other, can we? And so they link that and say, this verse goes with verse 24, that third let us command. But I want to suggest a slightly different way to read it today. I actually think verse 25 goes with all three let us commands. I think what the writer is saying is we need to gather, we need to meet and encourage each other to do all three of these things. We need each other to help each other draw near to God. We need each other to help encourage us to hold tight to our hope. We need each other to be spurring and encouraging each other on. And that's the reason I think that is because the wording that the writers used, let us draw near, hold tight, spur on. So the invitation is to make sure that we are genuinely in community and in relationship and gathering with each other. It was an old Christian mystic about 500 years ago called, what his name? I can't remember. I've just had a mind blank. St. John of the Cross, that's him. St. John of the Cross was the first person that I know of to use a very well-known analogy of a coal. That when a lump of coal is in with a whole bunch of other coals and it's on fire, there is an intensity of heat that is shared among the pieces of coal. But it was St. John of the Cross who said, you take some tongs and you take one piece of coal out and you put it to the side. That piece of coal is going to grow cold over time. 500 years that analogy's been around. So many people have used it, but it's bang on. And what the writer is saying is we're like a piece of coal. If we just sit out on our own, we grow cold in our ability to draw near in intimacy with God. We grow cold in our ability to hold tight to our hope, and we grow cold in our ability to encourage each other. We have to be in the fire together. We need to be in community where the intensity of relationship is helping us to spur on and to hold tight and to draw near. You know, I've read this passage of the Bible so many times in my Christian journey. I've preached it a number of times, but I've never noticed a beautiful little phrase that I've picked up this time around. In the middle of verse 25, in the middle of the negative and the positive command, there's a fascinating little phrase. Here's what the writer says. Not giving up meeting together as some are in the habit of doing. Just think about that for a moment. What is a habit? A habit is a regular routine of life, isn't it? A habit is an ingrained pattern of behavior that we just do naturally because that's become normal for us so that we don't even have to think about it. I mean, I'm picking most of us got up this morning and brushed our teeth because we're in the habit of brushing our teeth. How many didn't brush their teeth? No, I won't ask that. But we're just in the habit, aren't we? We brush our teeth and we don't even concentrate as we did when we learnt to do that as kids, to carefully squeeze the paste on and then put it in and go the right way. We just now do it instinctively. It's an ingrained habit. When we jump in the car, I hope the ingrained habit is to immediately put the seatbelt on. We don't think deeply about it. It's just the ingrained habit for most of us, I hope, that we just put the seatbelt on before we head away on a journey. If we're sitting at a cafe and we've ordered a nice flat white or a date scone or whatever it is, and someone brings that to our table, I hope our instinctive pattern, habit of behavior, thank you. See, there's these habits that we just now do in life and we don't even think about it. Here's what the writer to the Hebrews is saying. Sadly, there are Christian people who have developed a habit of not meeting. Just think about that. There are people who have so not bothered to connect with God's people over a long period of time that their natural inclination is to lean away from community. The natural pattern of their lives is they don't show up. And what by implication the writer is calling us to is to instead develop the habit of leaning in. Develop the habit of turning up. Develop the habit of meeting together to encourage. See, friends, this is the big idea of this passage today. Cultivate the holy habit of gathering. It's the key idea. Cultivate the holy habit of gathering. You see, we talk about things called spiritual disciplines. These are holy habits in our lives of prayer and fasting and reading the word and solitude and silence and celebration and all these other things, practices that help us in our walk with God. One of the most important spiritual disciplines is gathering. You're practicing this morning by being in church, by being here for this service. You are practicing a holy habit of gathering. And what the writer's calling us to do is to cultivate that habit, to make it more and more the natural habit of our lives, the ingrained pattern. So rather than getting to the weekend and not being sure or not whether we'll bother turning up at church this week, instead it becomes the habit that we're going to be at church unless something comes up, but our natural inclination, the ingrained pattern of life, we're there. The ingrained pattern of life is that we're engaged in a community group and we're showing up. We're not going to allow other things to block out that gathering of relationship. Our ingrained pattern is there are some spiritual friendship in our lives and we meet regularly with these people and they're important to us in our growth. Cultivating the holy habit of gathering. See, if you flick back to the book of Acts, when the church was born on the day of Pentecost, the Holy Spirit was poured out. 3,000 people came to faith in Jesus in one day. It was a mega church in Jerusalem. And then at the end of Acts chapter 2, there's this description of how they gathered, what their meetings, what their life was like as a church. And in one of those verses, Acts 2 verse 46, it says this: each day they continued to meet together in the temple courts, and they broke bread in their homes and ate together with glad and sincere hearts. Notice the two locations. They gathered in the temple courts, which was the court of the Gentiles in the big temple in Jerusalem, which could take thousands of people. It was the only place in Jerusalem where the whole mega church could meet of 3,000 people at one time. So they met in the temple courts as a large group, and then they met in their homes in small groups. And ever since that day, this has been the habit of the Christian faith. We gather in large groups for certain practices like sitting under the word, like worship, like corporate prayer, like communion. And we also gather in smaller groups that we call connect groups here for intimacy and for sharing our lives and for more intimate prayer for one another and to eat meals together, to take communion as part of that as well. And the gathering of God's people has often been this rhythm: large group, small group, large group, small group. And what the writer to the Hebrews is saying is that we need to gather together in both large and small group to draw near to God and to hold tight to our hope and to spur each other on. And the call is to cultivate a habit, not of leaning away from community, not of letting every other thing take priority over gathering, but instead to lean in and to make this regular, ingrained habit of no, we gather, we meet. Not in a legalistic way that you're never allowed to miss church and you have to be at every community group, connect group meeting for the whole year. But hey, if we can be there, we're there. We're committed. We're leaning in. Cultivate this holy habit. So how do we do that? As we finish, I want to suggest just 3 simple words. 3 simple words. Prioritize, pray, and look. So the first word, prioritize, is simply a matter of saying, hey, this needs to be in our calendar. That Sunday morning worship, if we're in town, we're there. And maybe we have to miss it occasionally for some event that's taking place or, some special sport tournament or whatever. But by and large, we're here and we're making this a priority. This is not the only thing we do if nothing else works out. But we say no to brunch because we want to be in church. This is a priority on our calendars and on our internal calendars. Connect group, that's a priority in our lives. Oh, you want to meet next Tuesday night? Sorry, Tuesdays don't work for me. That's connect group night. And again, not to say that's legalistic and you can't never miss one. But our habit is to prioritize gathering with God's people. Secondly, pray. I picked up a really cool little book by an Australian pastor a couple of years ago called How to Walk into Church. And he had this brilliant idea. He said, why don't we, as we walk into church, or even as we drive into church, what if we prayed this simple prayer? Lord, where do you want me to sit today? Where do you want me to sit today? Now that freaks some of you out, I know. Because some of you have been sitting in the same jolly seat for years. In fact, before we replaced the seats, there were some indentations of certain bottoms in certain seats. Because you've sat there for so long. But this pastor was saying, what if, as we arrived at church, as we turned up for Connect Group, what if our prayer was, Lord, where do you want me to sit today? And then we're open to the way that God might move us to sit in different places and with different people. And that moves us to the third word, look. Because when we pray the prayer, Lord, where do you want me to sit today? You know what that does? We're now suddenly looking around us at the people around us as we arrive at Connect Group or we arrive at church. And maybe as we sit and we look, we see someone that we know is going through a hard time and we have the opportunity at the end of group time or at the end of the service to put an arm around them and ask them how they're doing and to pray for them. Maybe as we sit here and we look, we realize that the person sitting next to us, we've never seen them in church before. And so we make sure we turn to them and we never say, are you new here? Because what you may find is they've been coming longer than you and you've just never seen them. What we say is, how long have you been coming to Grace City? Hi, I'm Brad. How long have you been coming to Grace City? But what a powerful way to cultivate a holy habit. Prioritize this in our calendars and in our hearts. Pray every time we gather. Lord, where do you want me to sit? What do you want me to see? And then look. And look around. Who is there that I can encourage to draw near to God? Who is there that I can encourage to hold tight to our hope? Who is there that I can encourage to spur them on and help them grow in the Christian life? Cultivate the holy habit. This whole series, friends, has been all about what's the next step for you? What's your next move? And some of the moves that we've talked about are moves that you make once. And you don't make them again. The first time you say yes to Jesus, you say yes to Jesus. You get baptized, you don't do that again. But many of the moves here are moves that we come back to again and again. And sometimes it's just reprioritizing prayer or inviting or groups or whatever it is in our lives. And so the question is this one of these moves that the Holy Spirit wants you to reactivate or recommit to today? either to the regular gathering of worship on a Sunday, because that has honestly not been the priority in the pattern of your life, or perhaps to re-enter the world of Connect Group and to find others that you can do life with. And if that's something you'd love to do at this end of the service, head out to the Connect Lounge and talk to the team out there about what that looks like. But the call as we wrap this series up is to cultivate this holy habit of gathering. In this book, Church, Why Bother?, Philip Yancey writes these words, kind of as he concludes his thoughts. He says this: church contains something I desperately need. Whenever I've abandoned church for a time, I find that I'm the one who suffers. My faith fades, and I love this line, and the crusty shell of lovelessness grows over me again. He says, I grow colder rather than hotter. And so my journeys away from church have always cycled back inside. Let's cultivate the holy habit of gathering. So as we finish today in our service, we're going to do some of the things that we normally do. We're going to have some prayer. We're going to take the communion elements representing Jesus' body and blood shed for us. We're going to sing a final song or two together, and then we're going to leave. Today, I want us to do that differently. I want us to really think about what it means to gather in both large and small group. So for those of us in the room, I don't know how you could do this or if you're watching online, but anyway, for those of us in the room, we're already gathered in a large group. But I'm going to ask you to do something completely weird. I'm going to ask you to stand up, and today we've gone around the auditorium and disconnected all the seats from each other. We're going to ask you to stand up and circle up. I'm going to ask you to grab your chair. We're going to make a complete mess of the auditorium. I'm going to ask you to create circles of 6 or 8 or 10 people, and we are going to pray and take communion and sing within small circles of gatherings. All right? This is more chaotic than I thought it would be. Fantastic. Hey, let's go to church, they said. Let's have some fun. Goodness me. Now, if you don't want to take communion today, that's completely fine. If you don't normally take communion, if you're just here checking things out, you don't need to do communion. You can just let others in the group do it. All right, if I could just have your attention back to me now, and if we could just quieten the room, I just want to give you the instructions on how we're going to finish church today. We are going to do all of the normal practices that we do. So first of all, we're going to pray. And I'm not going to pray today. I'm going to ask you to pray in your groups. And not everyone needs to pray. But if 2 or 3 in the group could just lead a really short prayer for the people in your circle. Not everyone. Don't feel any pressure if you don't like praying out loud. But if there's 2 or 3 that feel comfortable, just pray a really short prayer thanking Jesus for all that he's done. And then as a group, take the communion together, take the bread together, and take the juice together. So pray and take communion. And then when the band sees that most people seem to have taken communion, they're just going to lead us in some final worship songs. And so you can either stay seated in your group or you can just stand where you are. And we're just going to sing at the end of the service. And then we're going to linger. I want to invite you to just take a little bit of time in your group, just to hang out with people, get to know them. If you are desperate for a coffee, then as a group, why don't you head out and grab a coffee today and let's just linger together. That makes sense? Pray, communion, worship, linger, and cultivate the holy habit of gathering. God bless.